your dreams, your hopes, the things that you want to write down in your sci-fi novels, your fantasy novels, and hold them in their hands and crush them before a live audience. And we're going to start really quickly with, I'm just going to basically go down the line in this direction and have each of you introduce yourselves, what your fields are, and then we'll be taking questions from the audience immediately.
Hello, I am Laura Okagaki Brasper, and you can shorten that to Dr. Love. I'm a doctor of microbiology, immunology, and cancer biology.
And love.
And love.
Okay, and I'm B.J. Myers. I am a professor of biology at the University of Minnesota North, and I particularly hate bad biology movies and stories and things like that. So you know where to get me. Yeah, just bring up Star Trek on Yale or Prometheus.
There's a whole panel on that.
Yeah, I will be at the Prometheus panel at 11:30, and we will be eviscerating that abomination of a movie.
Hi everyone, I'm Siouxsie Wiles, and I'm a microbiologist, so I guess, bring your infectious disease to me. But I'm also obsessive about things that glow in the dark. So, bioemissions, for instance. So, the world are like the planet. And then I've forgotten with the blue people, then I can tell you about it.
Pandora.
Avatar, yeah.
High five for pink-haired microbiologist.
Splendid.
Yeah. As soon as they legalize, cloning and genetic engineering, I'm there.
So right off the bat, we're going to throw it to the audience. I know that you're all sci-fi buffs, you're all sci-fi lovers, connoisseurs. Name something that you would like to write about that you want to pass through some scientists first before it makes it to paper.
Or it's also acceptable if you've read or seen something in movies or television that strikes you as maybe a little bit off. We can probably clarify for you why it's off.
There's also a whole panel on that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Alpha, you said you talk to you about Star Trek and it'll get you going. I can only imagine, but I'd just like to know specifics. What part of Star Trek's biology problems, and I know they are legion, particularly against your goat, or squid.
Humanoid aliens everywhere with bumpy foreheads is the only difference. That's obvious one. But most striking to me is the idea that you can have a hybrid Vulcan human with multiple hearts and green blood. You know, that's like saying you screwed a crustacean and you got something out of it.
At least in the Star Trek universe, there's actually an in-canon reason for this. Apparently there was a precursor race, yes, I know, it was billions of years ago, who in their precursor race, they seeded the rest of the universe with DNA that would eventually create this hominid creature.
And in that time, there's no evolutionary divergence at all.
Sounds legit to me.
Nope.
And they did this billions of years ago to create a species that has now existed for, 200,000 years.
And the entire purpose was so that they could figure out how to make a hologram of the original guys to say, hey, so we made you. And that's it. How egotistical was that?
I did read in one of the books, Star Trek novels, where they actually sort of lampshaded the whole how the hell do you hybridize a Vulcan and use it with? Well, naturally you can. The Vulcans being expert geneticists worked everything out artificially. And I know by their face that still doesn't make any damn sense.
It's a lot of work to get laid.
Well, it wasn't the laid problem so much as the actually having offspring.
Right. Well, and taking physiology that's half human and half green-blooded, two-hearted weirdo. How do you use those together and make them work?
All that they said was I'm not saying that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You might as well just say magic.
Yeah, it's just trying to make something that's dextro amino acid. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody was talking about go to work 10 and involved in
No.
Right. Oh, don't bring that one.
I'm done.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, so that's one common theme in a lot of these stories is bad aliens. And you know, in a sense, you can say, well, in Martin Berry's case, it's really just saying, I don't have the budget. I don't want to tell these stories about people using aliens as proxies. Okay, that's fine. It's a literary device, but please don't try to gloss it over with science.
So I saw you raised your hand first. That's a really good question. Let me repeat it.
Yeah.
So,
That's a good question.
are there actual hard limits to how quickly something can grow if they're taking in the resources from the environment?
And there are, well, they're taking services. Well, for instance, if you're looking at developing embryo, rapid divisions in an animal like the zebrafish I work with, you can have one cell division every 20 minutes. Okay, but that's with a cell that's preloaded with nutrients. It's got everything, and mom packaged everything in there so it can do it. If you look at human embryos, typical division rates are more like every division every half a day to a day, a couple of days. And that's the case where you've got an embryo that isn't preloaded with all the nutrients you need. So microbiologists would know something about maximum growth rates.
Sure, and every organism is different, and it's gonna come down to the efficiency of the metabolism systems, right? There's several different systems for metabolizing all the nutrients that you need, the proteins, the carbohydrates, everything that you need to make the cell. And it's going to come down to how quickly those enzymes can process, and we can engineer them to be faster, or they can occur naturally to be faster in some organisms versus others. And it's, I think, a matter of putting them all together into one organism to make them grow very fast. And there are some, at least microorganisms, that grow considerably faster than others. Some that can replicate 20 minutes consistently. They don't slow down. Yeah, 20 minutes is about the same. Is about the fastest. Others, there's bacteria that, even though you think that they would grow really fast, because their bacteria are, it takes 6 months to a year to grow enough culture to do any experiments worthy of doing. And I think it's part of it is the efficiency of the proteins that you have in the system. And I'm biochemistry, speaking based on biochemistry, there's probably a finite limit to the amount of processing that a single enzyme molecule can do, right? Like, you have to have it with the right temperature where the protein doesn't degrade or denature, where the concentration of the substrates are just right, and the concentration of the enzyme is just right to make a maximum efficiency for the protein. But to get all of that for the entire system proper in a cell is going to be the tricky part. Make sense?
Yeah, I think another aspect of the problem too. Nick Lane's written a couple of really good articles on cellular energetics, and we're operating pretty close to the maximum limit. That basically what you've got when you look at the molecules involved in producing energy in the cell, you've got this high-powered dynamo operating in the cell membrane. And for instance, one of the hypotheses for why we have mitochondria is they provide a distributed control system for regulating the power plants of the cell. And that without that, it's very easy for the cell to damage itself. a lot of the free radical questions that Dan Stella produced by these energetic. So an organism that operated at a much higher rate than we do, that grew faster than we would also be unstable and probably accumulate many errors.
Like, probably look like the thing.
Yeah, the thing wasn't exactly a very stable creature.
There's also a buildup of toxicity that you're going to have if if one enzyme is functional, it may not. The next enzyme down the line might not be as functional. So for a real life example of that for you guys is I have something called Asian flush syndrome, which is really about 20% of the Asian population has this. It's a mutation in a gene called the aldehyde dehydrogenase. And what it is it's part of the alcohol metabolism pathway, where the alcohol gets metabolized into aldehydes. The aldehydes then get denatured or get broken down into the next step. But my aldehyde dehydrogenase is bad, so it doesn't denature, it doesn't dehydrogenate the aldehyde. So I get a buildup of aldehydes in my system, and I get sick. I turn bright red. I get
For those of us who don't know, what exactly are aldehydes?
Aldehydes are like formaldehyde. So it's a subtype of a chemical compound, organic compound.
Okay.
And we have ways of naturally breaking these down. We have enzymes that, as part of metabolism systems, will break it down into the next step, which eventually will break it down into water and carbon dioxide, which is basically the ultimate goal for anything, or most of the alcohols and carbohydrates that go into our system. But without that enzyme, I get a buildup of these aldehydes, which for most people, you guys can break them down. Most of you guys can probably break them down just fine, but I can't break them down very easily, and I get sick. So while my alcohol dehydrogenase is fine, I can break down the alcohol fine, I can't. The next enzyme in the line is bad. So in a cell, say in something like the thing, if we have one really high functioning enzyme, we'd have to also get all the other enzymes in that to function well. And it's definitely more than one mutation or one, spill of some toxic waste that a spider crawled through and, bit Peter Parker or whatever, that needs to happen in order to. It's just more than that needs to happen.
Are you telling me that Peter Parker is
Oh. Santa Claus is coming. Don't worry, Santa Claus is coming.
Can I bring my bioluminescence here though? Because bioluminescent bacteria convert aldehyde into a fatty acid to produce light. So actually, if we introduce you with a synthase, that might help.
I'm down with that.
Totally down with that. In the dark.
That would be so cool. I think it'd be like, that would be the best party trick. Instead of everybody going, oh, look at how red she's turning, and be like, look at she's glowing.
Yeah.
That'd be so cool.
I think the bottom line to answer your question is that no, if you're going to get radical changes in the organism roughly our size, we're talking monkeys. It's just unpractical.
I know the gentleman in the back had a question earlier. I don't know if you still have one.
Yeah, okay. So let's say you had a story where you wanted to talk about like a first contact situation with a sentient alien species. Okay? What sort of stuff would you want to be considering there that basically, if I'm right now, what am I not considering I should be thinking about? What in order to do that right, what would a good alien look like or not look like?
So can we just start with the name is probably going to be microbiological?
Okay, well, imagining a first contact. Imagining your first contact with a multicellular. Sorry?
If you obviously you're not going to be speaking the same language at first, how would you even know that they're sentient?
Well,
How would you handle first contact with an alien species you couldn't speak with, you didn't even, was barely multicellular but still was sapient? What would you do?
in context, there is the mathematics, the universal language of mathematics, as the universal. I don't know how I really honestly have no idea how, like, yeah. I mean, I don't know if they'll know what a sigma sign or whatever is, but.
You'd have to find some way to abstract it.
No, I really think there's two problems here. One is the easy one, which is convincing each other that you are sentient, that you're aware, and that, just flashing some technology, doing something that only a tool-using species could do would probably be a good signal. But I think the real problem is signaling intent. As human beings, we interact so much with these subtle facial cues. But just the fact that, for instance, we can tell women and men apart is kind of amazing. Because that's tricky. It's really subtle differences between us.
Whereas to an alien species, we would all look like ugly bags of mostly water.
Right. Yeah. And for another example is never smile at a chimpanzee because the chimpanzee sees that as a threat, like burying their teeth at them. So there's a lot of little things like that I don't. How do you then negotiate in a friendly way with a 6-foot-tall cockroach, for instance? What?
You give it whatever it wants.
Sugar water.
But maybe it's sitting there thinking, "Oh, you're a 6-foot-tall water slug, ooh," and it's just as horrifying.
Well, in reality, are we dealing with this problem right now on Earth? I mean, just because we treat extraterrestrials differently than we do terrestrials. I mean, we can see evidence all over the place of animals being able to communicate and work together and have a much higher intelligence than a lot of humans give them credit for. And we disrespect them all the time. So, I mean, why would our reaction to an extraterrestrial be any different? How do we know that things at the bottom of the ocean didn't come from space?
Okay, but that brings highlights my second point is detecting intent. We've got a long history of working with the animals on this planet, and we do not typically assume that when you look at a mountain lion or a shark, that it wants to have a conversation with us, right? So why would you assume that the 6-foot cockroach you just met has any intent other than just simply overwhelming you, squishing you like a bug?
So the problems are manifold in that you don't know whether or not they're going to consider us sapient. And you don't know how to communicate with them once you do convince them that you're sapient.
So I guess the question I'd ask about your story is how are you handling it? Is it two sapient beings stumbling into each other and they're staring each other in the face, or is it more long-distance communication or swapping radio signals?
I had more in mind a face-to-face sort of thing, but it could go either way. I mean, this is basically for a long-run role-playing game. I'm willing to keep my options open at this point. So,
I think what history shows us is that when humans stumble onto alien species, what we usually do is stab them.
yeah.
We do that with alien humans, so.
Right. And so, again, we're trying to speak as realistically, not necessarily what's best for your story, but, for storytelling purposes. But I think if you don't have a prelude where there's some recognition of the existence of these beings, and some communication at a distance where you're not immediately in conflict, it's usually going to be bloody or ichory or whatever.
Okay.
Question over here. How likely is it for a 6-foot-tall cockroach to even exist? What was the answer? So
You caught me parroting a bad science fiction trope. I'll let these people speak for me. I'll just sit here and change.
I'm just going to shake my head.
yeah,
You want to go?
Actually, I'm going to admit that I don't know how big ones can get. So I'm going to plead ignorance. I know that in New Zealand we have some fantastic large things, but they're nowhere near that big.
I like them.
Yeah, and there have been bigger ones that have existed previously that don't anymore. But actually, I'm not sure how big the big is.
So is there there are limitations based on the fact that you have to build a carapace, that you can't, the structure of the carapace, or what?
No, the limitations are energetic.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, you can build a carapace that's strong enough to, we do this as engineers all the time, right? The tank is a giant insect. But you need the power plant. And most organic things are not going to have the energy to even weather bugs, for instance, are kind of slow moving. They're not exactly going to find all.
Yes. Back there. I can't see.
Lobsters, which are made biologically puzzle. Then you can kill them, but if you left the cockroaches lobster and it just kept growing and aging, it would never really die, and you can't die.
The question is whether or not lobsters are immortal, and we need to try to hunt them down and kill them before they rise up and take over the world. I might be extrapolating a little.
The biggest one found is like 44 pounds or something. I don't know the size of it.
Yeah.
I'd imagine it'd be gamey at 44 pounds.
Yeah, it's still delicious with butter.
Yeah. Yeah, something like outer space. You don't have to worry about gravity as much. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to again cite further than them. There's no such thing as an immortal organism. It just simply can't happen. That physically, that things aren't going to degrade. There's a myth, for instance, that some organisms do not get cancer. It's not true. Every multicellular organism has the potential to get cancer at any time. So yeah, you have your giant 100-pound lobster that's really food. Even less tasty. I don't think the butter would help you.
No, that's sounding kind of disgusting at that point.
Kind of the tumory bits.
Yeah, and also, in general, here I am, I'm one of those aging people, and there's metabolic and physical changes that go on as you get older. And it would be a developmental problem to correct them, yet unfortunately my development is done. I can't reset myself and go back. Although things like metamorphosis open up interesting avenues.
I know you had your hand raised, and then you, so I'll take you first. It might.
It's bad. We just have to like eat the microphone.
French kiss.
Is that better? I do this?
We have to share germs.
Okay.
Is that better? Okay.
So it's early.
You had a question. That the bacteria that could reverse its age, as I recall, there was a species of water bear, I think it's called.
It's not bacteria.
It's not bacteria, though. I don't know.
What do you mean by reverse its age?
Guessing it has to do with turning out probably the telomerase. We're doing the repairs on the telomerase. So a lot of when you look at age in cells, what they're looking at is at the end of chromosomes, linear chromosomes. I should make myself clear about that. Are repeated segments of sequence that are called telomeres, and they protect the ends of the chromosomes, any functional ends of the chromosomes. And as we age, as our cells replicate, those telomeres shorten. And that's a huge contributor to our age. So they've been trying to understand how to basically make our cells seem younger again by elongating the telomeres in our cells. And so a lot of the work that you see on aging and cells aging, or microbes aging, is based on telomere length and turning on and off basically the enzymes that can elongate those telomeres that are at the ends of chromosomes. And there's been a number of studies lately, and I can't remember. I do know that there was one recently where they found that in stress, that certain cells are able to turn that on again and lengthen their telomeres. But I don't remember exactly which species it was. I think it was a fungus, but I can't remember which one.
We do it in our gonads all the time.
Maybe you do.
Yes.
Well,
Please be aware that not all of us have gonads. So.
Well, but in the germline.
That's very personal information.
Yeah. that we have the telomerase enzyme. We can make the telomerase enzyme. It's switched on in our germline because, in a sense, the germline is immortal. Even if the organism is. Go ahead.
Also, the idea that sex requires that
But,
Well, I think the parents kind of die, I mean, anyway.
you don't
Like-
need, and also you don't need a sexually reproducing species for develop. Yeah, the pattern is that when you from the developmental perspective, if you look at human beings, what we are is a small collection of slowly dividing stem cells that occasionally bloom into a burst of tissue. And that tissue is then exposed to all the hazards and rigor of living in this universe. And they are damaged and fall apart more frequently. But you still got the stem cell population at the heart of it. That's changed. So what you see in development is this boom and bust pattern, where you're just constantly making a slowly dividing, carefully preserved core of what you live.
And you can do that through massive doses of vitamins, right? Kurzweil method?
No, forget Kurzweil. But what it is it means that mortality is coded directly into our way our cells organize. That the idea is that you will have a set of cells that are basically going to sacrifice themselves to build arms and livers and lungs and things like that, putting themselves out because that structured tissue is going to gradually deteriorate over time. And then the way, of course, we do self-repair is by tapping into that quality of stem cells. So, just turning on the telomerase is not a good idea because the reason we do that is the union of this population is doing a job for the organism. And because it's under hazard, because it's dividing rapidly, it's human errors and also losing cancers. So what you want to be able to do is cut that off. Remove that, replace it with more stem cells.
So what was your question?
Okay, basically that's great. It's a bit of a side effect of sci-fi from I understand enough where the DNA going or something like that product would something like this thing or
So, how is it possible to splice your own genes and give yourself the ability to shoot fire from your fingertips? Come on, tell us how.
Fiction. Okay. Well, I mean, it's one way to put new genes into you.
Yeah, and you can put in a gene randomly into your cells and hope that it doesn't hit a really important gene that is doing things like regulating growth of the cell and preventing cancer. But there's very few things that are done with a single gene. It's easier to pull apart in single-celled organisms. We can think of things in a single gene. When we start getting into humans and other multi-celled organisms that have very extensive phenotypes, hair color, eye color even, there's a number of genes involved in things. So to splice in a series of genes, to program in to do one specific thing it's almost beyond my comprehension to be able to do that at this stage, scientifically speaking. Like, I mean, I think of how difficult it is, and for me in the lab, to splice in one stupid gene into my stupid organism that takes forever to grow, because I work on like one of the slowest things on Earth, and to get one stupid gene into that stupid thing, just to make it glow green under the microscope for me. But to think about like trying to get it to do something more complex, like grow wings or something like that, is honestly the complexity of the program needed for directing which cells to turn on to do something like that, how the cells should just develop the structure, the extra bones, the extra skin, all that stuff, the color of the wings that you want, because inevitably somebody's going to want pink wings, some people are going to want purple wings, some people are going to want iridescent wings, some people are going to want black wings with like scales and crap.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the complexity of the number of genes required for that is I mean, in the thousands, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, when you get it down to it, isn't it just basically like a mishmash of genes in, say, a bird or a bat that's going to be responsible for the wings, and not any specific? There's no one specific gene that says this is a wing.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. The other issue here is that say you want to splice in the genes from a bat to give you that.
What else are you going to get?
You're that.
Literally. No. The problem is if you're going to do that transformation, what you're doing is importing a whole collection of bat genes and inserting those, writing over the other human genes that I have. And so I might want to have bat wings, but I end up with, because I'm being transferred, I also end up with a bat face, which would not be so
awkward at parties.
Or you lose your arms in favor of bat wings, and so you'd be, armless, because really those are, the similar structure. So you have to figure out a way to have arms and wings, which is a whole other problem right there.
And fundamentally, the genes are involved in building the wing, and also the genes are involved in building the pancreas. That there's a large shared core of genes. And you're talking about you put in fat genes. Okay, so which one? Everything? So just transform every cell and watch the fat DNA?
I'm not sure which of you two has your hands up first.
For other genes, Spider-Man's called lizard regeneration. Is there trying to get the regeneration gene from lizards or from starfish or something like that? Yes, and the humans would be near impossible, but to combine that with any other
So could we get regeneration into any other animal, even not necessarily humans? We don't want to make another lizard, because you know what happened last time for New York.
But that's the same thing about it not being one gene.
Yeah.
And just because it's not a human doesn't mean there's complicated genetically.
Yeah, the genetics of something like a mouse or a frog are as complex as the genetics of a human. We're just allowed to work on them in the lab because they're not human. Because yes, they grow up faster. They have shorter lifespans. We know their genetics. It's easier to work with them. It's part of the reason why that they're, or zebrafish. Zebrafish, what? You don't even have to play any Gary White for them in there. Like,
they'll splice their own.
Yeah. Crazy.
Right.
But they're equally complex, like biologically speaking, equally complex.
But I would say though that there is hope for the regeneration story. There is some limited regeneration that we would like to have. That our tissues do have regenerative capacity. What often stops regeneration in us is is not because our tissues are living, the tissues that generate scar tissue that blocks from the growth. There's been a fair bit of research done on, for instance, spinal cord regeneration. People care a lot about spinal cord injuries because they're right now, the current technology is so irreversible. But you look at other animals, and they have no problem at all. I used to do all this bizarre research on frogs, where, for instance, you'd stick out their eyeballs and rotate them in different directions and stitch them back in place. And the nerves would all grow back. They just reconnect. It's fun. Because
fun?
For science.
Is this your Friday night? You're a twisted individual.
But it was funny because you put their eyes backwards and then you put a cricket in the cage with them, and the cricket's down here and their eyes are flipping out, so the cricket's up there and they all strike their tongues at them. Anyway, you can have hours of entertainment.
Wow.
But that's because frog regeneration doesn't seem to be damaged by scar tissue. They don't do that. So in that case, for us, what we have to do is find a way to suppress inflammation of scar tissue while avoiding other damage.
It's going to be the cancer. Anything that you're going to grow a whole lot in a short period of time, you're going to end up with cancer.
Well, yeah, and also frogs will put nerves anywhere. It's like there's no brakes on things. You can actually do this experiment where you transplant a frog eye to the tail of a tadpole, and the nerve will grow up the spinal cord and terminate your visual center. So
that's a little freaky.
Yeah.
You've had your hand up for a very long time.
Okay. One of the things I hear about a lot in science fiction is the notion of something evolving in space, or otherwise a living organism that has, through some magic, become adapted to space travel. What would it have to do in order to actually function in space? I mean, even assuming a bare minimum, it more or less dies at one end of its journey and it comes back to the other, or it just shuts down.
Okay, so space whales.
Microorganisms can do it. So part of that, microorganisms have a great, especially single-celled bacteria, fungi, but have great capabilities in spore forming. Spores are incredibly resilient to desiccation, to drying out, radiation, sun damage, all kinds of things, and still come out intact on the other end, perfectly viable. As soon as they hit water and nutrients, they can germinate and become fully functioning, viable, unharmed, normal fungi or bacteria again on the other end.
And there are some that you can buy in the back of comic books.
Sea monkeys.
Okay, but the operative phrase you used is when they contact water and nutrients, then they can start doing it. They're basically locked in.
They would have to be.
They're not evolving.
Yeah.
Space either. They're just until they get to their destination.
They'd have
How
to
would
be
you evolve?
dormant.
Be able to? Is it even possible to evolve to get out into space? What habitat would you have the ability to transiently be in a vacuum?
Well, I think about it in terms of, an asteroid strikes, say, a planet like Earth, and a chunk of Earth flies off into space, and you've got bacteria and fungi, among other things, on that hunk of rock and or soil, which are then, under those conditions, able to convert to their spore forms and survive while everything else is kind of sheared off. You have what's left is a rock with some bacteria or bacteria and fungal spores on it.
It's also one of the reasons why this treaty almost to make sure that when you send stuff into space that it's not contaminated with microbes. So most countries I think have signed up to this, and NASA spends a huge amount of money trying to make sure that everything's clean. And what they're worried about is the spore infection, because you can kill all the bacteria, but if there are already spores on or within the spacecraft, then they get sent and worries about contaminating other planets. Or, you know, when you get to outer space and you think you found alien life, you haven't, you've just taken something with you.
What are not going to be living in space.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I have to cite thermodynamics. You've got to have an energy source. What's the biological energy source that you're going to find in a vacuum or a rock?
Hurtling through space is going to be a lot of space radiation, cosmic background radiation. You get out and past the solar system, it's going to shred your DNA. But
Yeah, that's high energy stuff. It's not very good.
unless you evolve to use it.
Well, then there's the magic of melanin, which is a great dark pigment that has evolved in fungi in order to protect them from strong UV light, among other things. I mean, granted, it's very strong out in space, but I mean, there are mechanisms that are good that can protect. There's also nooks and crannies on asteroids.
But I'm not looking for a mechanism to protect. I'm looking for a mechanism to harness that energy and actually use it.
Oh, to be alive.
Yes.
Okay.
That's harder.
The review in the back. You've had your hand up the longest, I think. So what's the actual likelihood we would get stuck with the Antares flu? Yeah.
Well, okay, so I would have thought this would depend on their mechanism of cause of disease. And so you have organisms that require a specific receptor. So these are the things that we often, like either we don't get them or a particular other species or a horse or whatever doesn't get it because they don't have the right receptors. If it's something that produces a toxin that maybe doesn't require some receptor to get into your cell, then that would kind of be very applicable, I guess, as something that can
Yeah, no, I agree. I think as far as viruses are concerned, I think it's very less likely. Virus requires a receptor on the cell in order to get into the cell to hijack the cell's reproductive mechanisms in order to reproduce and cause disease and to reproduce the virus and spread. Whereas something like bacteria and fungi can produce toxins, which are the cause of the disease. They're foreign proteins that are the root of basically what makes you sick when you get them. So I think the likelihood of getting something, it would be less viral, more likely bacterial.
Yes, it's still likely, but there would be differentiations between the kind of thing. And so it's the reason, one of the reasons why we're as microbiologists quite frightened about, things jumping species, because they do that. And if we have receptors that are similar enough, then we can make those viruses, but there are other things that
I'd also point out that if you go the other way, because it's really, really different. The direction of I'll cite the example of the conosphere, which produces toxins. Some of the most lethal toxins on the planet, which are largely small peptides. And the way to evolve these is just by making random short peptides. And if you just make a random collection of peptides, a significant fraction of them will be incredibly toxic to you. They interfere, they bind various proteins in your cells, and they'll screw them up. So a random collection of peptides is deadly. So what you might have happen is that because, well, let me flip that around. The reason we can eat other things is that they've evolved to be close enough to us that they don't possess those toxic peptides. They're close enough to be digestible. If we have a completely alien world, it could have just as key components of every single cell on this planet some little peptide that, because they evolved to use it, is fine for them, but it would kill us if it's exposed to it. That's what we'd have to hope for, is that our peptides would be toxic to it and kill it before it kills us. Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I was going to comment on the big camera, just zoom out at some of these maps, versus diseases that specifically harmful, diseases that we understand harmful to one animal, another one dead, but people can with it, or diseases for an animal that we have animals, but the symptoms be there. There's so much unknown about it that you just have to hold the test. Because just the alien being short-sighted and illness doesn't mean that that's the same science that we're looking at bacteria or virus.
Right, so it's an unknown. I actually think it would be most interesting if we expose two alien biota to one another is not the competition cellular, the ecological competition. Because resources would be the same everywhere, potassium, nitrogen, all that kind of stuff. That's
Steam gas.
what's that?
That's a joke.
Okay. That's stuff that any organism can exploit and find advantages to exploit. So you've got to, imagine Earth is invaded by an alien species, and all they do is plant alien beings that thrive on our resources, but interact in unpleasant, complicated, surprising ways. That could be a fun show. What's that? Oh, it's been done. Okay.
But I guess also, going back to this thing, remember that we are more microbe than we are human. So there is that complication too. That just not even bad ones, but good ones. Actually, what traits might we pick up from these alien invaders too? They bring new genes. Yeah.
Assuming that they use DNA
Yep.
the same way.
Oh yeah, so the ecological struggle occurs in our deaths. And that would be
But zombies go.
I said right before the panel, if zombies come bite me first, I don't even feel like dealing with all of them.
zombies don't work. I think this is a theme for me in this panel is the energetics problem. Is the big one. That if you cut off blood flow to the tissues because their heart isn't beating and all this kind of stuff, there's no way tissues of the body can derive sufficient energy to do anything.
But that's why they're all shambly and stuff, right?
Unless you're 28 days later, in which case they're really, really fast. So.
Yeah, but their hearts are also beating.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the only way you can get a zombie is something like a combination of pieces.
That's false.
Yes. but the dead zombies, those can't work. What about it?
So some kind of fungus that infects your brain and then changes your behavior.
So there are fungi that infect the brain.
Sure.
And you should know that. You're my husband, and I study that for a living. Toxoplasmosis is interesting. It's a parasite that infects the brain, and it's believed that it's possible that toxoplasmosis makes us love cats even more because we pick it up from their feces, and it makes us them like we imprint on them. Yeah. So.
I've been saying for years, cats are
I agree, and I have 4 cats, and I can agree with that.
I only have 2. Does that mean I'm only half as infected as you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm sort of jumping back from the zombies and the gene mod thing, and I'm just thinking.
Gene-modified zombies.
Right.
That That's no and no.
Someone else can go that way if they want. What I thought of something like an alien life is, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is sort of prefacing the question. Most of the eukaryotic life on the planet sort of diverged from the bacteria, if I understand correctly, as opposed to the archaea. Is my understanding? That most eukaryotes descend from bacteria as opposed to archaea.
No, the other way around.
The other way around?
Yeah.
I thought the archaea diverged from the bacteria after convergence.
That we have more gene similarities to archaea than we do to bacteria.
Okay. Because what I was going to ask, but apparently the premise of my question was now valid, was if we were to find a planet where the dominant microorganism was archaea rather than, or something like archaea rather than would be bacteria,
So
and
you just have to flip the question.
the prokaryotes, or something like that. I'm wondering, I know that the archaea have some biochemical differences from us that are really unusual. Like, there are places where they use ethers and esters. Fuzzy on the details. I'm wondering if that kind of biochemistry had gone on to form multicellular biota on this other planet, what do you think that would be? Not in terms of specific species, but just generally, what was the biology of the archaea derived stuff? But maybe that's the wrong question if we are more similar to the archaea.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that's coming from the premise that the only types of life are, say, eubacteria and archaea. Like that, those two would have evolved on another planet.
Or something like that. I guess what I'm fundamentally asking is a life form with somewhat different, say profoundly different biochemistry that evolves into a whole lineage of unicellular and multicellular organisms where, say, I don't know, they use the opposite chirality of glucose or stuff like that.
I think that's pretty much every sci-fi trope of another planet that has evolved life. You've got another planet with evolved life.
Oh, so in other words, they wouldn't necessarily look all that different at the cellular if they were.
Assuming that they're using the same DNA. The same way.
I mean, there's infinite possibilities, I think. I mean, if you take, say, Thermus aquaticus, which is a high-temperature growing organism, everything could then exist at really high temperatures because it's thermally stable at higher temperatures, right? Near boiling.
I think the fundamental problem here is trying to shoehorn an alien species into archaea or bacteria. It doesn't work. Yeah, they're going to be radically different. And you know, even if you look at the history of life on this planet, just forget about other planets. What you find when they map genes and where the gene lies, by comparing them to the species, there was a burst of genetic innovation roughly 3.8 billion years ago. There was a rapid rise of a great many gene families, and the rate of new genes being added is relatively slow ever since. So, what you have is any system, any world where things evolve, what you think will happen is you get the first, the foundational forms established, and then you go just about anything which way. If you look at eukaryotes, for instance, just look at eukaryotes, what are they formed? These forms from life in the algae, or plants, and people. It's not like you can say something about the end result from the starting point.
So we're not evolving toward an endpoint.
No.
Right. I know there were a couple more hands in the back. You're the only one that I see with your hand up now, so go ahead.
the orcs in that are technically fungus. So I'm just wondering, would it be possible to ever have like moving sentient fungus?
Sentient fungus.
Slime molds do. I mean, there's mobile. There are mobile fungi. Sentient. So I mean,
Is there an actual barrier to sentience? Like, can they develop a nervous system or something that is possible?
I mean, the largest organism on the planet is a fungus, and it's like, 9 miles in diameter. It's huge. It's underground. I mean, they form these enormous mycelial networks that interact with, by chemical means similar to, not quite a nervous system, but they do interact in a very interesting manner. So the thought of one rising up and walking across the yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of picturing it in my head, kind of finding it amusing. But I mean, there's no central nervous system in fungi. Each individual cell can exist on its own and live on its own and be perfectly fine on its own. It doesn't require. I mean, usually, sometimes they're happier. They just grow better with their buddies nearby for various reasons, but they don't really need. They don't need a whole organism. Like the largest organism is 9 miles in diameter, but it doesn't. You can take a little piece of that, and it'll be fine. It doesn't need. It doesn't need to be part of the whole. Does that make sense?
Let's take it a step further then. Let's just extrapolate out. There are a couple that I can think of, a couple of examples in sci-fi where there are sentient vegetables, basically, sentient plants. E.T. is essentially a vegetable, basically.
I hated that movie. I still never saw that movie. So.
The Triffids are all motile, sentient, aggressive plants.
These are alien species from completely different evolutionary background. Why are we calling them plants and fungi?
I guess because they have that,
because they're
that
green?
characteristic. Because they have the cellulose walls, or do they? I don't know.
Are you sure?
I haven't dissected one.
Yeah, because I think that.
Yeah, is it fair to call them plants?
Right. I mean, if you're going to say cell walls, then I would say, yeah, plant cells with cell walls have barriers to a complex pattern of development. So it's not likely. I would also say, again, the magic word energetics, you have to start with an inner trope. Because they're the only creatures that have enough energy to do these elaborate behaviors, generate. What's that? Kind of both. But yeah. Yeah, but then also a lot of them are relying on fairly more energy sources. That's their niche. But yeah, so in your example, why are they called?
I think the reason they're classified as fungi is because they reproduce by spores, and that's why, even though they're particularly healthy, you can't get rid of them because you kill them all and then they make spores, and spores pop up and more stuff. Whatever.
It's a really like poor reason to be classified as fungus. Considering bacteria also makes spores, they're sporulating bacteria as well. And sporulating, kind of sporulating parasites as well. So it's kind of a simplified idea of what a fungus is.
Right. And are they haploid? Just curious.
Are they
Ultimation generation?
polynuclear?
I go just because they're green. And that's the science fiction explanation for any green feature is it's got photosynthesis. There's a lot of imaginary biology.
Or
GPF Comics has intelligent slime molds?
Yes.
I'm gonna have to read this again.
Are they plausible?
Really, they're intelligent slime molds, and you're asking if it's plausible.
Never mind.
One of the main characters is
One of the main characters, PG, is a slime mold, and you're asking if it's plausible. Really?
Some of my best friends are slime molds.
Okay.
Okay.
So, my understanding that all of our amino acids are one protein. If we would teleport without our knowledge to an alternate universe where it's mirrored, it is mirrored, the history of that planet just needs the oxygen. Would we die? If so, how fast?
Ooh, the Alice in Wonderland problem. Through the looking glass.
Huh?
You wouldn't be able to metabolize anyone?
You have to eat yourself. Or others. Eat every other human.
Every other human who actually made it through.
Well, you'd only be lacking the protein, right? Like, you could eat the carbohydrates on that planet. You wouldn't be able to eat the protein. So you need to get a protein source, which means you just have to eat other humans.
Or you could go on a very high carb diet.
Yeah, but carbohydrates also have.
Yeah. You need an acid. Instead of not amino acids.
Right.
I think I asked about that earlier.
Right, and one is you can drive energy from the other process. So it depends, yeah. If they're starchy and they're not, and carbohydrates are the same orientation, you know, very easy to digest. But if it's protein, yeah.
Well, there's probably microorganisms. See, the answer to everything is microorganisms. You notice a trend here. There's probably microorganisms on that planet as well that will be able to either digest or convert one to another. I mean, that happens on this planet.
Yogurt.
Yeah. So you're eating nothing but carbs and yogurt for the rest of your life on this crazy alternate planet.
Exactly.
I know there was some more. We're at time? Okay. Wow. I guess we're out of time. It's been quite fun. If you have a question, it's really, really quick.
I was just wondering if there are any films or books that you enjoy that you feel got the science right.
What got the science right? That's a plug.
It is a plug, and I may be on that panel. I'm not totally sure. Are you? I think you're on that panel. There are movies that got the science kind of close or less annoying than other movies.
But they never ever balance their centrifuges. Anything that ever has a centrifuge never balances it. So any science movies that have that's my big thing. So I just imagine these things kind of spinning.
Yeah, exploding centrifuges all over.
Yeah, anytime if it's a movie that treats humans in novel situations, I can live with it. But if they start inventing biology, I get really
And that's our panel. Thank you very much, everybody.